to this
I couldn't help but notice your pain.
My pain?
It runs deep. Share it with me.
edition of the Purple Journal podcast. I tried to do a sound effect for the first time ever, so I hope
God,
it
I hope
worked.
that worked.
Otherwise, I almost would. I almost prefer the awkward silence, to be honest.
It was awkward on this end.
Oh man,
Hashtag credibility.
I'm sweating more than usual. I'm here again. This is the Purple Journal podcast. My name is Joe Johnson. I am your host. For some reason, I am the owner of purplePTSD.com, and I also write things there periodically. I'm here with Mr. Joe Oberle, who also writes for purplePTSD.com and thesportspost.com. Covers the NFL over there. How you doing, man?
I'm good. Good to be here.
Hooray. And as always, we have Mr. Luke Braun in the Peanut Gallery. Making me feel bad about myself. He's a writer for purplePTSD.com.
Why, Luke? Why?
Why what?
Why not?
Why are you making Joe feel bad about himself? He does that all on his own.
I don't need any
it's
help.
It's true, but I want to get in on the fun too. He's hogging it all.
It's painfully true. And for the first time, I actually want to also shout out our sponsor before we get halfway through the show, which is SkullYourHome.com. It is a website for an amazing realtor and gigantic Vikings fan named Nick Wimperis, who sells and helps people buy homes in mostly the East Metro, around the White Bear Lake down to St. Paul. So if you're looking for a house and you don't want to work with a Packers fan, check out SkullYourHome.com. But here we are in the second off week since the season ended for the Vikings, and it's pretty bare bones. I'm not gonna lie. We're gonna do a lot of personal stories.
Can I start you with some news that broke literally right before we started recording?
What?
Yes.
Chargers plan to announce as early as Thursday that they are moving to LA. I think that just became official.
Wow.
Goodness.
Does that mean...
So LA is about to get 2 teams, and neither of them are going to be worth anything.
And if people don't know, Luke lives in Los Angeles, so he's got some perspective on things. And I know that I had read a while ago that the per capita attendance ratings for the Rams was really awful, one of the worst in the league, and then maybe people aren't supporting them as much, which I found really surprising.
No, they aren't, because a lot of people already have anybody who's a football fan and living in LA already has a team. So you're basically asking everybody to leave their team. Also, the Coliseum is ass for an NFL audience, so that's a terrible place to play. So hopefully if there's a little bit of hype around the new stadium and some people will go. I mean, I know some people who were like, okay, the Rams are here. I'm going to become a Rams fan now, who were maybe casual fans of another team or didn't have too staunch of a loyalty.
Luke, I've always wondered about this, and you're a good person to ask since you're out there, but what is the deal? Granted, they're all within state. I mean, what was Al Davis doing when he was moving to Anaheim, then back to Oakland and Anaheim, and all over Hell West and Crooked, and all these teams moving about? Now they have another one. It's so messed up to the fan base, and for the reasons you just say. Just because they throw a team out there doesn't mean everybody's suddenly going to be jumping on the Chargers bandwagon.
And
it'll take time. I think in 5 years you'll have a lot more Rams fans than there are now. Especially because, the Rams team that came to LA is just, unwatchable. Nobody's going to get excited about this team. But maybe in 3 years, they've kind of purged the horrible coaching that stopped me from being able to even tolerate them. Now they're just boring instead of boring and hateable.
There'll probably be new fans. But, if I was an Oakland Raiders fan, and I know they have a Raider Nation and they're very loyal, and if they were moving all over the place, I'd be pissed.
Al Davis is insane and also wants to he just kind of wanted to stick it to the league a bunch of times.
I know, which is totally sticking it to your fan base at the same time.
Yeah. Well, my question is it a generational thing? Are there older people who remember the LA Rams and who followed them to St. Louis? Or I guess what teams are people I would assume people in LA might like the Chargers, so you think they would automatically be happy about that. But what teams are people supporting down there?
Yeah, it's
wherever they came from. So here's the thing about LA. Nobody's from LA stays in LA.
Yep.
Nobody grows up in LA and is like, yeah, this is a great place. I want to stay here.
Okay.
I know a couple people who grew up in LA and like went to college here and then like stayed and whatever. And there's a few people that wanted to stay close to family or whatever, but most people who are in LA, I mean, you can ask someone in LA, oh, where are you from? And that's like a question of like where in the country or even where in the world are you from? Nobody is from here. So they'll all take their just like me. They all take their affiliations with them.
Okay. I don't know, man. It's really hard to break a sports affiliation for me, anyway.
Yeah.
I grew up. Well, I guess I can't say that because
The North Stars.
I was just gonna say I was old enough. I went to one of the last North Stars games. I think I was. When did they leave, Joe? 91, 93? 94. They didn't. They left before
it was
94.
about 94. It was before I started working for the Wolves because they almost moved downtown to move into Target Center. But
yeah.
No, I grew up with them too. I mean, I played hockey in my backyard as a kid growing up in Mankato, and we drove up. I'll never forget the first time I ever saw Met Center. I thought I was in some palace, some magical place. You know? And
I played hockey there.
Oh God.
It was the most amazing thing ever, man. We played a game there, and I was like, and then I found $50 in the stands afterwards, and it was like the best day of my life.
That's huge. But I mean, you ripped my heart out. Norm Green did. I mean, I've as a result, I've been slow to get on with the Wild bandwagon. When they signed when they signed Zach Parise, he was the son of my favorite North Star, JP. So then I said, okay, all right, I'll check you out, and I've been following him ever since. But I was so mad and so distraught. I guess that's where it comes from. Why I asked this about Oakland.
Yep.
You know, how did they expect to build a fan base and build a following if you're moving your team every 5-6 years? It just boggles my mind.
Yeah,
I also think Al Davis really wanted to be in Oakland, and I think part of why Mark Davis wants to move away from Oakland is to stick it to his dad.
Okay.
No way.
Did you know that his haircut is also to spite his dad? That's real.
I was just gonna make that joke, but I don't know if you're being serious.
That's not a joke, though.
I was literally just gonna say that word for word.
He got it, and his dad was like, "You look like an idiot," and he kept it until the day that man died and beyond.
Wow, I kind of respect him now.
It's not working for him. That haircut is not working.
Oh, he looks ridiculous. Did you read the article that came out and got a lot of traction about him in like his 2003 Nokia phone, and he drives like a 1998 like Dodge Charger or something hilarious?
That makes sense.
He's just as nuts as his old man then.
He's just a weird guy, but he's a pretty good owner. I mean,
yeah.
Compared to Al Davis, he's very hands off with football operations, which is good in an owner. But can you imagine Ziggy Wolf chiming in on?
No.
Like whether or not we should keep AP? That'd be horrible.
No, I'm really grateful that our owners are pretty hands off. I mean, sometimes they're on the sidelines and stuff, but that's rare. I mean, they've done a really good job. I don't think they get a lot of credit. I think people resent the fact that they got that stadium, but that's just a reality of how the NFL works these days. So you can't really blame them for taking advantage of something. They're probably rich because rich people take advantage of loopholes, and that's what they've done.
They also give plenty back to the community, so I'm not too bent out of shape out of it.
Yeah, I'm not either.
One thing about the Chargers, if you watched any of their home games down the stretch of this season, they were not home games. If you watched their home game against the Broncos, that was an orange crowd, and it was disgusting. Wow. So sorry to both of the Chargers fans who are still loyal, but the rest of your fan base sucks.
So that means is Oakland still really trying to get to Vegas? I know that there's
There's still a lot of news about that. Oakland is incredibly loyal and does not deserve this like San Diego does.
No,
yes,
I agree with you, man. I mean, I've been to Oakland, and I grew up as an A's fan. So
you move that team out of state into Vegas or what have you, and I think there's some fans that will still drive, the whatever it takes to go over to Vegas to see that team, but they're gonna lose that fan base eventually.
I think having an NFL franchise in Vegas is extremely tacky, and I don't like it. Like LA on steroids. Nobody in Vegas is from Vegas.
Nobody lives in Vegas.
They have more people living in tunnels under the city than they do in the apartments above it. It's just a gross town. I don't want.
It's really just a city of mole people.
That'd be a good name for the team. But yeah, I just can't. It sounds like an arena football team to me. The Las Vegas Raiders, like ick.
The Vegas Raiders, yeah.
Yeah, there's that's where it might be tacky, but that's where the motor or the engine of the NFL is. That's where the money-making machine is, right out there in Las Vegas.
I just don't believe, obviously, I think the NFL is too established to be moving teams around. I mean, I think LA obviously needed a team because it's the second biggest market, but just leave things alone, man. I mean, everyone's making enough money. There is a ton of greed going on. I mean, just, build a new stadium in Oakland. I've been to not the Coliseum. I don't know what the McAfee Stadium was, what it was called when I was there, but I was there for an A's game, and to me, it was at the time the Metrodome they still existed, so we were sitting in front of a bunch of local A's fans, and they just kept ripping on how shitty the stadium was, and me and my dad were eating the sushi that we got as part of our ticket, and like in awe of how great the stadium was because it was an outdoor stadium, and compared to the Metrodome was amazing, but yeah, I can see how it's pretty outdated, and
at least St. Louis moved to Los Angeles. It was, now we have Jeff Fisher out of the league for a little bit, so that's good.
I still think he might be a defensive coordinator somewhere.
Yeah, could be.
Even though, I mean, I ripped on him a lot as a head coach, but as a defensive coordinator, that makes a little bit more sense because the standard lowers. Speaking of bad head coach hirings, Doug Marrone.
Yeah.
Ooh.
And Denver hired Vance Joseph now, which is weird.
There's a lot
Greg
of...
Williams got another job in Cleveland.
Yeah, I can hate Cleveland now. That's way easier.
Hey, didn't Tom Coughlin get hired in Jacksonville too?
Yeah, he's their
GM.
He would be
VP of football operations.
He's like their Brzezinski, or he's like a front office guy.
Oh.
Or he's above the GM.
I thought maybe he was a VP of football operations. I guess I don't know what the difference is. Beep. But yeah, they're trying. Speaking of a team that's going to move, I thought they were going to move to London, and I don't think that's going to happen. I don't know. Either way, there's also some news that we wanted to cover for the week. I know that one of the bigger topics, like if you go to Reddit's Vikings sub, there's like their headline is a picture of Bradford and Teddy with like fight, like Street Fighter style between them.
That's amazing. I don't know who made that, but that's incredible.
I'm surprised that they did that, considering how the sub usually is about stuff like that. I just was surprised that they did that.
They love doing weird banner stuff. Well, on the off season, they do weird banner stuff.
Yeah.
Do you remember a couple of years ago all the banner competitions and people just started doing like horrible Microsoft paints and it was amazing?
Yep. I participated in that a little bit because
that was phenomenal.
I'm the king of paint. But yeah, I mean, we've touched on the Teddy versus Bradford thing, but Luke actually wrote a piece that's blowing up. Thanks a lot to Reddit. Breaking down the Teddy and Bradford thing. It was kind of a part one, but it was 2,000 words of pretty amazing analysis. So if you kind of want to talk about that, we'll get into it.
Yeah, so I wanted to take this as unbiased of a way as I want. I kind of had my opinion going into it, and I actually think my opinion shifted a little bit after doing all the research and kind of doing a little bit more dedicated analysis rather than just like a cursory look at things.
I kind of picked up on that.
I kind of have walked back on my stances a little bit, and I'm a little bit less on the extreme. So basically, the first part of the article details like how we have to approach this discussion, because I think a lot of people go, well, we have to start Sam because Teddy might not be ready. And it's like, well, by then we'll know if he's ready or not, right? So it's like Schrodinger's Teddy. Schrodinger's knee. But basically, the only scenario in which Teddy starts is the one where Teddy's fully healthy.
Yes. And
the one where Teddy is better than Sam. Those are the only those two things need to be true for Teddy to start. So if Teddy is not healthy and Sam starts, it's like, well, this is easy. We don't need to talk about that.
Yeah.
So then it becomes a fully healthy Teddy versus a fully healthy Bradford is really the only discussion that's worth anything. So we can kind of ignore the injury in that way. And then the second part of the article compares a bunch of stats from Sam Bradford's 2016 to Teddy's 2015. Using some of the stats that aren't like passing yards and touchdowns, but like passer rating is a much better like conglomerate of all of those things, and then adjusted net yards per attempt, DVOA, and ESPN QBR. The fun part is ESPN QBR is the only thing that says Teddy is better than Sam.
Yeah.
And the reasons for that are fascinating because of the way QBR works. Not many people know about how QBR works.
Weighted,
Huh?
would it be weighted differently because it's weighted against the other 31 quarterbacks, right, in 2015 versus Bradford against the 31 quarterbacks of this year? Like everything's a 0 to 100 based on the play of his competition. Is that how QBR works?
It's based on average, and that average is calculated across multiple years. They are both adjusted for strength and schedule, though.
QBR
That's the thing. QBR is as of this year. So
Okay.
Teddy's 2015 QBR is not adjusted for strength of schedule. This isn't in the article because it was too many words and I actually cut it. But Teddy's QBR is not adjusted for strength of opponent. Sam Bradford's is. Teddy's had a harder schedule. So actually the gap, if you took all of Teddy's exact season and placed it in 2016 and made it adjusted for strength of schedule, the gap would actually be bigger.
Okay.
But the reasons for QBR, and people like crap on QBR all the time because of some pretty funny anecdotes. They've since updated the formula a lot, and I've talked about QBR a lot as a good stat. But it takes into account things like, did these yards come on yards after the catch, or were they all air yards? Stuff like, were you under pressure? How long? How far did the ball travel in the air? And a lot of these things to kind of quote unquote assign credit to offensive line and wide receivers versus the quarterback.
Is that an algorithm, or is somebody manually looking at the tape and doing that? That seems like I can't get my
That's
mind
an
around
algorithm.
how they can quantify all of those things.
There's some subjectivity to was he under pressure or not, but not a lot. It's pretty easy to look at a play and determine if there was pressure or not. There's just as much subjectivity to that as there is to how many yards he got actually versus like was there a good spot or not and blah blah blah.
Okay.
But it's all math. This isn't a Pro Football Focus situation where they're like giving him a grade. It's all math, but it's just like a formula, and we don't know how these things are weighted, but we can figure out which things are being considered. Things like yards after the catch and pressure and stuff.
So why do you think that Teddy's QBR was the one thing that was better? Like what's the differentiating
Fewer
factor?
yards after the catch and more air yards. His average depth of target was like a yard greater than Sam's or something like that.
Makes sense.
And so there's that. There's the fact that QBR forgives throwaways and counts them as kind of just a zero, just a neutral.
Okay.
Where stats like DVOA count them as a negative, and kind of by the way they work, something like passer rating, since a throwaway is an incompletion, also counts a throwaway as a negative.
Oh.
And Teddy led the league in throwaways despite having the fewest attempts in the league. So he had a crap ton of throwaways, and that kind of skews everything. And that's kind of an interesting thought because, like, do you think throwaways should count against a quarterback?
Yes, no, absolutely. Negative, no. Let me jump in here because I'm not going to be able to say much here, but I can't believe they don't consider that. I mean, that's a good play, to throw away a ball when you have nobody open, and most times it's a good play.
That's it.
It's not every time. Sometimes you might just be panicking. Well, then you have to add something else to it, but it certainly shouldn't be a negative. It should be neutral.
Well, I think it depends. I think it depends.
Okay,
I was just going to say, I think it should depend on the situation because a lot of rookies throw the ball away because they don't see somebody or whatever. Like Joe said, they panic versus somebody like Tom Brady throws it away to avoid a sack or whatever.
Or in Teddy's case, who was instructed to throw away the ball.
Well, and he'll, a scramble, and it's kind of an interesting fundamental thought, right? If you're under pressure, would you rather have your quarterback scramble and throw it away or complete a check down for a yard and a half?
Or take a sack.
That's kind of why that, like, right there, or take a sack. That right there is why Sam kind of performs better than Teddy in everything but QBR.
Okay, and do they bring sacks into? Does that account?
Yes.
Okay.
Sacks and sack yards lost. So a 10-yard sack is worse than you scrambled back and actually lost a half yard, and it technically counts as a sack.
Because the way I look at it is, I can see why Teddy's QBR would be higher because he had a better offensive line and a pretty dominant.
It's actually false. He was under a crapload more pressure because of scheme, because he was in the old Air Coryell 7-step drop scheme.
Yeah.
And even before Norv quit in 2016, that was way less.
But wasn't the line ranked as like the 15th best line? Was that when it came to rushing. I thought they were kind
That
of in the middle of
included
the
run
road.
blocking, and in 2015 the run blocking was better. Yeah, no, so the pressure is really weird anecdotally because we're like, no, the offensive line was way worse this year. We watched them. And even though the offensive line in 2016 played worse than the offensive line in 2015, because of the scheme and the Shurmur influence, that effect was mitigated. So Sam Bradford was actually under less pressure than Teddy ended up being.
Because he got rid of the ball right away. And that's
Right,
why
for
his
a
yards
yard
per
and a half and
attempt,
a touchdown on third.
that's why his yards per attempt are worse. That makes sense. But you said that you
attempts
kind
are
of
actually almost exactly the same. They're like 7 and then 7.2. It's like really close yards per attempt.
Okay, I thought you said they were like a yard different.
Average depth of target, meaning how far you threw it. That includes depth of passes that weren't caught.
Okay. So how did this change your mind? I guess what was your thought going into it, and then what was it when you came out of it?
I think what I was wrong about is I overrated the idea of Teddy's pocket presence and Teddy's ability to scramble. I did a kind of pseudo passer rating calculation where I added rushing plays and fumbles into passer rating, basically including like every run play as a completion for that many yards and every fumble as an interception, and then counting passer rating that way.
Okay.
And the gap closes, but Teddy still doesn't win. And I guess in my brain that would kind of flip the tables entirely. And while Teddy gains an advantage through that, his rushing yards weren't that good, and he fumbled almost as much as Sam Bradford.
Yeah,
in
dude,
fewer attempts.
I've seen so many people online saying that we want Teddy because pocket presence and he's a lot more mobile, and it's like Teddy is not Michael Vick. I don't know where people are getting this idea that he's this great scrambler. Sure, he broke that guy's ankles last season, maybe the season before on that scramble, and he is more mobile.
Right before he got hurt, it was in the preseason.
Yep, there you go. And right before he's more mobile than Bradford, but it's not like he's going to mitigate the offensive line because granted he was doing a lot more.
Advantage.
There's one other thing that you can maybe include in defense of Teddy is he's 23 and he's ascending. All things being equal, he's ascending if he's healthy, and Bradford's eventually more quickly in years hence is going to start descending. In his
perhaps, and health is a big.
He's
is a big issue for both.
For sure, and he's got an injury history, and I can totally see him getting hurt next year, even if we upgrade the.
Well, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying he's like 28, right?
He's 29. Yeah. He's 29.
Yeah.
He'll be 30.
Don't decline; they plateau.
Totally. I think he's in his prime right now, in regards to especially the type of quarterback that he is. He'll be.
It depends on how long you're talking about this.
Once they're 40, they decline.
If you're talking next year, my point is, the older guy is going to deteriorate sooner than the younger guy.
Yes.
I think that the one positive that Teddy has is age, but I do think there's a lot of people who are making an assumption that Teddy is going to either keep progressing to a level that's higher than what Bradford's done, or that he's better than he actually was. He looked great in the preseason, but it was the preseason. I think there's this idea that Teddy is the savior that people wanted so badly that they're emotionally attached to somebody who I think his ceiling is basically at where Bradford's level is or below. I think Bradford is a more complete quarterback, minus the ability to scramble. But I don't want a scrambling quarterback. My thing is if we're going to actually make a run to the playoffs and the Super Bowl, we're going to need to have a decent line. So that should negate the fact that we need somebody to run for their life because the line sucks. If the line's bad, we're not going to. That showed this season. We're not going to do anything. So
I disagree with that a little bit, Joe. Just because if you see Aaron Rodgers, I saw.
Oh my God, he pisses me off so much with his pocket presence.
But, look at that guy. He's
insane.
Got the sixth. I saw a ranking today for I'm not sure what the parameters were, but they got the sixth best offensive line in the league.
Packers.
And and yet he is constantly on the move back there, and he's one of the reasons why he gets those 8-second time frames to throw.
Because it takes 10 seconds for a receiver to get open.
Yes, totally. And moving around, he's so good at it, and mobility really, the lack of mobility with Bradford is a concern to a certain degree, especially with a line like the Vikings. I can say change your offense just to make him useful. I'm a Bradford guy, don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying mobility for me is a concern because you see the advantage that the Packers have because what Rodgers can do, it's phenomenal.
But then you could say, look at Tom Brady or Peyton Manning. It's the same thing. I mean,
there are many ways to mitigate pressure.
My point is Teddy's mobility isn't enough for me to say I'd rather have him over Bradford. It's not a big enough factor. I don't think that's a big enough part of his game, and I think people are relying on that too much. But my main point is if the offensive line is as bad as it is this year and we need somebody to run around, it's why bother even arguing about. They're both going to end up dead anyway. We're not going to make the playoffs.
So there's Joe. There's two things you said that can actually be verified by math. The first is that is as Teddy develops, there's kind of a pattern to how quarterbacks develop, and it's that they get up to about 26, 27 years old, and then they plateau. They stop developing, but they stay at the highest level, and then they'll decline when they get like way too old, like 38 to 41, that age, like the Favre age. And then, as Teddy's stats kind of show, if you put him on if you assume that he will develop like an average quarterback develops, his ceiling is about the same passer rating as Sam and a little bit more yards per attempt, but it is slightly above Sam, but not really that much above Sam. So in the way you said that, he'll develop, but he still will get to about where Sam is, the numbers actually bear out on that. And then
dude, I just want to say, I just don't agree with it because you're saying the assumption is the average progression, right? It's too subjective to say that every quarterback. It's an average because
It's an average. You're right. Totally.
You know what I mean? The averages are taken out of context a lot. I mean, there's so much subjectivity to it. The injury, obviously. I just haven't seen in Teddy's game any improvement in the long ball, and that's the difference between him and Bradford, in my opinion. I think either of them can. I mean, I'm sure Teddy probably would have ended up with the completion percentage record this year too. I just don't think he would have been able to hit people down the field as much. I mean, I think the biggest thing that I haven't brought up and I've been meaning to because I got so much crap last year when I defended Mike Wallace on Vikings Journal. But you look at Mike Wallace being 10 yards away from 1,000 yards in Baltimore, and you look at what he did with Bridgewater in 2015 when he was wide open 7 or 8 times. That concerns me, and I don't think the average of other...
That is a weirdly misleading because
I don't think
for that you would have to argue that Joe Flacco 2016 is better than Teddy 2015.
And he
is. Joe Flacco was absolute trash this year.
But
if you put Teddy on that Ravens team, Mike Wallace would have crossed 1,000, probably 1,200.
How? They were on 2 different pages the entire season. He was wide open 7 times for a touchdown, and they completed none of them. I think if you're saying that Bradford, if you're saying that Flacco had a bad year, yet Wallace still had 1,000 yards, and Teddy had a good year, but Wallace had 400, I think that's more of a saying. Oh, then Teddy's got a problem if Flacco played bad, but Wallace still did better, considering it was the same player doing essentially the same thing.
I mean, the same player had a worse season with better quarterback play than he had. What I'm getting at is this doesn't have to do with the quarterback. Mike Wallace dealt with worse quarterback play in 2016 than he did in 2015 by almost every way you can measure quarterback play.
Except for his results? That doesn't make sense.
Maybe he just finally started trying.
I don't think
or
it was.
Maybe it's a schematic thing. Maybe it's a who's the offensive coordinator in Baltimore?
There was somebody.
It's also
it was somebody.
Thing.
It was somebody that Joe brought up a couple weeks ago that I joked was dead. It was. Let me look it up.
It's also an attempts thing. If you want to go with volume, Joe Flacco threw the ball 672 times this year. Teddy last year threw the ball 200 times less.
Marty Mornhinweg,
right? Yeah. It's totally an attempts thing. Joe Flacco has 200 more attempts than Teddy did.
But that still doesn't.
More.
That doesn't matter though when you look at the specific instances where Teddy couldn't get the ball down the field. He overthrew Wallace every single time by 5 yards.
Flacco's plenty of those too. His deep ball is a myth.
But how did he get 1,000 yards then?
By getting thrown to a bajillion times. Same way Adrian Peterson won the rushing title.
How many attempts and completions did he have versus last year? I mean, he ended up being the number one
targets, which is the lowest since his rookie year for him.
This
last
season.
year. I know that off the top of my head for Mike Wallace.
Okay, you're saying in 2015 he did.
Yeah, he had 50 more targets. He had 116 targets in 2016 versus 72 in 2015. And he caught almost 10% more this time.
But then if taking out the number of targets, if he caught 10% more and the quarterback played worse, that just doesn't make sense to me. My point is that Teddy hasn't proven that he can throw the ball down the field, and I think this does. It's maybe not the best argument, but I think it kind of
I don't think
is.
Mike Wallace is the way to prove that. I think Teddy's play is the way to prove that. I agree with your overall conclusion. I don't think Mike Wallace is what gets you there.
Well, I'm just saying he was our deep threat, and it didn't work.
And
I
part
just
of the
haven't
reason why he
seen
got
it.
so few targets as a Viking is he didn't get. I mean, he might have been open those 7 times, but he didn't get open on short passes. He didn't separate. I don't know how hard he tried.
He only did one thing, which is the only thing Joe Flacco does, and he doesn't even do that great.
Yeah, 14 yards. He had 2 more yards per catch. I don't know. Yeah, maybe he's not the best example, but I kind of think he is, just because he's the person that Teddy was throwing down the field to, and it just didn't work. So I think that people are assuming that Teddy's going to suddenly have this amazing long ball when he comes back, just because quarterbacks on average do progress up until 3-4 years from his age. But I don't think that's enough for me to say, if we had to make a choice, that I would choose him. The only thing I think he has is mobility a little bit in age. Other than that, I mean, I would love to have a 30-year-old quarterback who...
Don't plan on having him that I know you don't, but don't plan on having him throw that long ball next year. Next year's going to be, if he plays at all.
Can I put Mike Wallace into context real quick?
Just wait,
both.
finish my thought.
Sorry.
He's going to play it all next year. It's a recovery year. I mean, that's such a major thing to do. I don't think you can judge him in any way or fashion on how he does next year. So it's going to take him at least a year to get back to where he was ascending. So
all right. Real quick, just think about Culpepper, and he had a less major knee injury, and sure, he was a running quarterback, so that hurt him a lot. But I think the injury is going to take a lot longer than people think. So it's kind of a moot point, but it's a really fun argument in either way. But what were you going to say about Wallace?
Mike Wallace has a worse catch percent than both Thielen and Patterson this year by a lot.
Has a worse what? Catch
percentage. Like how many of the targets their targets.
Well, that's because we were throwing
caught.
the ball 1 or 2 yards every time, though. I mean, that there's always there's context to it too. I mean, if Wallace was the deep threat, he's not going to connect on as many deep balls as Thielen is going to 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage. But with that, what was that, Joe?
I was just going to say, I didn't see Wallace go for 212 yards like Thielen did this year. Just kidding. Go ahead.
I love Thielen, even though
God, he's so cool.
I am never going to personally let myself off the hook for my preseason prediction. Luckily,
and I haven't even busted you.
I know. I feel like you're waiting to, like, you're going to say something like when I'm getting married and they ask if anyone has a reason to object, you're going to stand up and say that. I'm just, basically, if people don't know, because I actually deleted that episode off of our SoundCloud and everything else.
You big turkey.
This preseason, I was saying that we should I don't know if I was saying we should or if this was what was going to happen, but I said Boehringer was going to make the team in lieu of Thielen, and I used a similar argument that I'm using right now, which was Thielen is a special teams guy that's shown what he can do. Boehringer has a much higher ceiling, and I was completely wrong. And
I told you at that time, I said, no way in God's green earth. So
it was a big talker that we had, and that's
it was.
Probably why that show failed.
I was going to say, we've stepped things up since then.
But we should bring up, too, that speaking of Teddy's injury, that there was a video that was online for about 10 minutes of someone on Twitter posted him. I don't know if he was, like, I saw a screenshot of it. Like, I know, Luke, you saw it. Can you describe kind of what it was?
I cannot name this drill, but you know the drill where they like lay a thing that kind of looks like a ladder on the ground and they like kind of high step through it? Yeah. He was doing that, and he looked pretty nimble.
Did he have a ball in his hand? I thought I saw him like drop. It looked like he was dropping back in the pocket. Maybe it was.
Did he?
I don't know. Maybe I just saw the wrong thing. I mean, I couldn't find.
No,
the
I
video.
think it was just a footwork drill.
Okay. And he looked all right though.
Yeah, no, his legs look very atrophied. They like not just skinny because Teddy's a skinny guy. Like they look like he needs to put meat back on them, like he lost a bunch of muscle from this, which
Okay.
is really the meat of the recovery process. But he looked nimble. He didn't look, if you told me he had torn one of those knees up, I wouldn't be able to tell you which one.
I read something very interesting that I wanted to see, especially with Joe going and being on the sidelines at training camp and whatnot. Somebody on Reddit had said that he noticed that Teddy kind of stands or walks pigeon-toed, and that the person writing this also had pigeon toes and had to get prescription shoes essentially, but that the doctor told him that weakens your knees obviously because you're not walking correctly, and that essentially the theory was that because he's pigeon-toed like RG3, that's why his knee exploded. So I wasn't sure if Joe, if you've ever noticed that he is pigeon-toed in the locker room or anything like that, but I thought it was interesting. Internet
Not that I've ever
journalism.
noticed, but I think it's a bit of a leap to make that, from pigeon-toed to knee exploding. But maybe it could weaken his knee, sure. But I think what he went through was over and above anything, of such a freakish nature that I don't think he can make that correlation. But I would say he has a different stride. I guess I'd never even thought of it in terms of pigeon-toed. I guess I'll look for that next time I see him. But I'd never really noticed it.
You guys want to hear something real weird about this? It's
What?
completely deleted off of Twitter and Vine.
No, it's gone.
It's totally gone.
I feel
I
like
don't think they wanted that to come out.
No, dude, I said this somewhere. I said that it probably was something, obviously, with Zimmer being extremely tight-lipped about things that he doesn't need to report, that they don't want to show their franchise quarterback's progress, online. It just seemed like, yeah, man, it got deleted pretty quickly. So
They won't show it until he's really ready to go. So we recall when Adrian Peterson was coming back, and we had all these updates and all this stuff going on with him, and they even brought in the media one day to have him jump up on some kind of thing they have, apparatus they have.
yeah,
at the,
plyometrics.
And Michael Urban's there of all people, and Sid is asking who the heck Michael Urban, or who he was, but that's beside the point. But so it's a different regime. You're right, Joe. I agree with you. Zimmer, I'm sure he ixnayed that thing, and you won't see anything until they're ready to, till we see him on the field. And so, I guess he's ready to go or something. He's not gonna. He's probably pretty mad that came out, I would think.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like something that's congruent with what they've been doing. And one thing Joe said, I think off air, that was interesting too in regards to Teddy is, if he were to play in 2017, he would obviously have a new offensive coordinator, which would kind of change a lot of things. And that was made, I guess, official this week. They promoted Shurmur from interim to full-time offensive coordinator for next season, which is great news for Bradford since they're BFFs. But what did you guys? Are you guys, I guess to put it this way, fans of Shurmur? Or what are your thoughts on him as the offensive coordinator?
I was not surprised. I don't think anybody was. I think we all thought this was going to happen. Many people thought it was going to happen when he was brought in originally. There was speculation, and then it was a foregone conclusion. I don't know if that was true either, but it was not a big surprise to me. And I know we're going to get to this later. The surprise for me was the whole Scott Turner thing, but that's not. I don't know enough about Shurmur yet to say. I guess I haven't studied that much, but I guess I wasn't surprised.
Well, what are your thoughts on the Scott Turner thing too? I mean, they're kind of hand in hand with coaches. I mean, people are.
I just that bothered me a little bit, and even though I expected it for the same kind of reasons, I'm sure there's awkwardness because of the contentious parting that apparently happened between Zimmer and Norv Turner, and here's his son, but he did a pretty decent job. If he's quarterback coach, first bringing in the past couple of years, helping Teddy develop to what he was doing. And then all of a sudden that, he blows out his knee and you got to bring in somebody else and transition him to this new system. And things went pretty well. I think he's probably good at his job. And if they're only letting him go just because, Shurmur wants his own guy.
Is that what they said, or is that just a theory?
That's the speculation. I don't know
Okay.
that. No, they've not said word one, but that's what they're saying. You know.
Well, to me, real quick before Luke responds, if the theory is that they fired him because of his dad, that implies that it was a nepotism move to have him on the team, and that he wasn't good enough to be there under his own merit, which kind of cheapens the why have a guy like that on the team then? You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah,
and so,
that's actually a really good point.
So it just
I'm not surprised
it
about
just
Shurmur, but I'm not happy about it. I've talked about that before.
Yeah, but I mean,
I've talked at length. But with Turner, I think so. On one hand, it's like kind of a middle finger to nepotism, which I like in principle. But on the other hand, it's like almost as bad as nepotism, right? Because like, okay, if you hired him under a bad pretense and then he turned out to be good, firing him because you hired him off of a bad pretense is like really dumb.
There you go, dude. I mean, it's like when Trump gets impeached, is or they're gonna keep Jared Kushner around. It just doesn't make any sense.
I don't understand it. If he's the best guy, if he's good at his job, and I thought he displayed that he was this year, you have to get around this. You can't just say, well, what we have to put Shurmur in his comfort zone. He shouldn't be in his comfort zone. As soon as you get in your comfort zone, because you got the people around you that are either yes men or familiar with your plan. I mean, then you start getting lazy when you get comfortable. I don't understand. I mean, well, I guess I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there was awkwardness. Too bad. Get around it. You're professionals. This
exactly.
Is
well,
this
and
is
look,
the guy who's good for the job, then you keep him. I don't care if he wanted to be. Then again, we don't know. Maybe Scott Turner said, "Yeah, I don't want to be here either." But it sounds like he was fired. So it's bizarre.
Yeah, it's speaking of comfort zone, I think Norv Turner quit because he was in his comfort zone and he didn't want to change, or he couldn't because he was way too in his comfort zone. And we've talked about that, and I know Luke feels that way too. But I also don't think it's the best thing to keep showing Bradford that we're gonna continually make changes around him. It's like he's had enough changes. Can't we have some stability going into next season and stop this carousel of coaches? I don't know. It didn't seem
madness.
It was one of the first times that I've really thought that it was a objectively bad management move. Like, I've really liked everything else they've done. I don't know. It just seemed like low class, if that's the right word.
I'm very unhappy with the coaching moves on the whole. However, what about this potential thought? Pat Shurmur just becomes QB's / offensive coordinator, which a lot of teams do with their coordinators, make them like also / a position coach.
Yeah.
And then he's just kind of Sam Bradford's guy and also Sam Bradford's person. That might be the plan. If they go out and get another random quarterbacks coach who like that's just getting a rubber stamp for Pat Shurmur, and I disagree with that for a bunch of reasons.
Right.
Well, and I've seen the argument too that people say you didn't need Turner because of Shurmur's relationship with Bradford. Like, people weren't saying Bradford had the completion percentage record because of Turner, but rather because of Shurmur. So maybe you're right. Maybe they're just going to give him both roles since they know each other so well, and maybe that'll be a positive. But either way, it just didn't look great logically. But other than that, yeah, I think we wanted to touch on, for the first time, that makes me feel very the playoffs, at least the NFC side of it, or just mainly the Packers versus Dallas game, or really, I guess, what your guys' thoughts are on who you think is going to make it to the Super Bowl, or at least who's going to play, not necessarily who's going to win. I have a bad feeling the Packers are going to make it to the Super Bowl, and it really bothers me. Jordy Nelson getting hurt is good, but they seem to be like one of those teams that gets hot at the end of the season. So yeah,
how do your bad feelings work out, Joe? That's what I need to know. You always have a lot of bad feelings. Do they tend to come to fruition?
I'm bottling them up.
That's healthy.
Yeah, I just bottle them up, and
I do not want to see the Packers in the Super Bowl. I would really prefer they lose this week. And even though it's loath to cheer or pull for the Cowboys,
it's such a bad.
I love the Cowboys. Dak Prescott's cool.
Oh, dude,
and Zeke is awesome.
Oh God.
Too much scar tissue, my man.
Yeah.
Fair.
I wasn't around in the '70s, obviously, but yeah, I'm not gonna lie. When I was younger, I loved Emmitt Smith, and I had Dallas starter jacket, and my dad it was probably the closest I ever got to my dad actually striking me in the face. But I don't like them either. But at the same time, I don't think Dallas is as good as their record implies. I think the Vikings should have beat them. Granted, our defense played really well, but I don't necessarily think that.
Oh, they're very beautiful. They're very beautiful.
Yeah,
I
think so too.
Rodgers is playing right now, it's phenomenal. It doesn't matter who's catching passes, whether it's Nelson or Avante or
Devontae Adams, yeah. If he doesn't drop it, I don't know if he's. Yeah, I know he had a lot of drops last year because he was on my fantasy team. I don't know if he's improved that or not, but.
Now they have a semblance of a running game, and my frustration with last week, all the time Rodgers enabled for himself back there. But are you telling me when you hear this old saw that you can call holding on every play, that you can't call? There's no holding on those plays when he's running around back there and these guys are still containing the defensive line. I'm not buying it.
Yep.
So that frustrates me a little bit, but that's just sour grapes.
I think Rodgers himself frustrates me more. I hear all the holding stuff, and sometimes I see it. I think as Vikings fans, we're a little bit more biased towards that. I see a lot of pockets where every single offensive lineman just dominates their matchup, and it's like, well, how the hell do you beat that? But without holding, they just like clock people. And then somebody finally does get through, and then Aaron Rodgers takes 2 steps and then dodges pressure, and then takes 2 steps and dodges another pressure, and takes 2 steps and dodges a third pressure, and then throws it into a 2-inch window to a guy, and it's like, God, I hate this team.
Tell me why he's so much better at this than a lot of people. I mean, you guys have played pickup football. Don't you sense when people are coming around you and you step up? I mean, I always scratch my head when I hear them talk about players that have a sixth sense. Well, no. I mean, he has a peripheral vision. He sees what's coming. He knows what to do.
It's based on experience. I mean,
how come none of these other guys know this?
I think the challenge comes in being able to. I mean, we can all see if somebody's walking up to us from the side, and somebody's going to come approach us from the side. We'll see that with our peripheral vision. I think it's the ability to do that, react to it, while also continuing to read the defense and their motions, and then find a guy and then be able to throw into a perfect window. Just like all the things he's perfect at. And he's also in God mode right now, which is why nobody's giving the Cowboys a chance.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that, again, losing Nelson changes things. I don't know if Randall Cobb functions as well as a number one receiver as he does as a slot gadget type guy. I think that's why he was also on my fantasy team last year, and he was awful. But yeah, Rodgers is playing at a really high level. I think that one of the bigger differentiating factors for him is that he has a gigantic chip on his shoulder. I think based on how he was drafted and then how he was treated with the Favre thing.
I'm sorry, I heard on the radio today that he's over that.
Well, doesn't seem like after you brought up last week, Joe, a lot of the people in Green Bay were calling for his head earlier in the season and everything. I think that I saw a lot of articles that when they made the playoffs or won the division that was like Aaron Rodgers proven right, and I think he buys into that and wanted to shut up a lot of his people.
He's got a new chip on his shoulder. He finally said that one was, he was telling somebody, I don't know who it was.
Oh, good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, who cares? Move on.
Maybe it's because Olivia Munn was too busy filming Office Christmas Party to distract him.
There you go. Speaking of distractions, I mean, I don't know a lot about life in general, but also what happened with Odell Beckham. Was he on he was on some sort of boat, and people were saying that's why he played bad? Was he?
He went on vacation for his day off, and apparently that meant he played. No, he just choked.
He's a nutcase. I mean,
he's a nutcase. He's young. He's never been in the playoffs. He choked.
As a former Viking, a Viking observer and fan all my life, I am so happy that all happened, because now the term boat doesn't refer to the Vikings as much anymore.
Oh yeah, we're not the most recent boat party.
I was gonna make a joke about that. It's the first thing that popped in my head.
The Vikings boat party was definitely more fun than the Giants boat party, though.
There's still the love boat.
That needs to be.
I can't believe the love boat didn't come up. They kept talking about it. So just don't say the love boat, please.
I did see the love boat get brought up when Steve Smith retired, because somebody referenced his rowboat celebration in the game after that, which I stand by, and it was hilarious, and we deserved every minute of it.
Absolutely.
I don't know. I mean, not to get into that, but how do you think you're gonna get away with that when there's like a waiting staff on there? You know, like there's teenagers and busboys. Like you're not gonna be able to
Oh,
tip them.
you're young and full of money. You feel invincible.
Yeah.
The only problem I have with Steve Smith. Now I can't say that while the Vikings did deserve that kind of ridicule, all these other teams have done these things. They do all kinds of things on their bye weeks. So they're all guilty of one thing or another. The Vikings just got stupidly
that reminds me because my dad was extremely furious about the Tracy Clay situation, and his theory was that Minnesota always is of any, and I guess I don't necessarily agree with this line of argument because it can be taken the wrong way, but Minnesota seems to be the most honest when it comes to getting in trouble for things that everyone else does, but we either just get caught or we're really honest about it. Going back to even Clem Haskins,
if you read, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, it seems like a lot of things that every team does, we get caught for.
I think it's this area too where we're a little less tolerant of some of that stuff. I mean, I'm reading The Gunslinger about Favre and his career, and how much the entire state turned a blind eye to his shenanigans and all his teammates. They knew everything that he was doing was going on, and it didn't. Nobody wanted to turn him in because he was like a football coach in Alabama or something. He's just above the law. So.
Yeah, it's different. I mean, that you don't want to justify sexual assault by doing that, but I think that, not to get into the U of M thing, but I think that was a little more complex than the rape culture people wanted to say it was. But that's a molehill that, if you want to follow me on Facebook, you'll see a lot about. Anyway, yeah. I guess we're just unlucky. I don't know. That's a good way to end the show. But do you guys want to make Super Bowl picks? Or you're resentful of it because of who you think is going to make it? I'll just say that I do think that it's going to be New England and Green Bay, and it's going to be a great game, and I'm going to hate every second of it.
I'm going New England, Dallas. New England wins.
Yeah, I think they're going to win.
How about an off-the-wall one? Pittsburgh, Atlanta.
Oh. Pittsburgh was my...
I think Pittsburgh's on fire.
I
could definitely go into an AFC championship and steal one.
They were my Super Bowl pick for the AFC earlier in the season. And
actually, if I had to make it... Oh, nice. If I had to make it on like the most merit, I would say New England, Atlanta. But I kind of wanted to say something different because we all said the Patriots.
Yeah. I don't know, man. Like I said, I haven't followed the Falcons at all. I know Matt Ryan had a amazing season. He's all pro or whatever. He took Brady's spot on the all pro second team or first team or whatever. But
this will tell you something about me. My concern about Atlanta is
it's Atlanta.
It's Atlanta, and they'll be one of the. There's like a handful of teams that haven't made the Super Bowl or certainly haven't won it. And if they were to make it and win it, they would bypass the Vikings as a team that won.
Ooh, I don't want that.
Yeah, misery loves company. We need it.
So it's Detroit, it's Atlanta, I think Arizona's been there, but there's only a few left. Philadelphia's another one. Well, they made it. No, they never did.
Yeah, they were like the Buffalo Bills of the conference champ. They went to the NFC Championship 5 times in a row or whatever.
Speaking of star-crossed franchises, if you guys were to die tomorrow and then be reincarnated, would you rather be reincarnated as a Browns fan or a 49ers fan?
49ers all the way, because that would mean I'd potentially live in the Bay Area, which is a dream of mine.
You still live in Minnesota. You just are born into a weird family.
Well, I will tell you that my
49ers, because they can still you can be like a Packer fan and point to the trophy case.
My nickname from my dad and his friend growing up, my first memories were of my dad making me get down and block, and they always called me Sapolo, and that's still Jesse Sapolo, man. They were huge fans of the 49ers back then, and it was like their second team or whatever, and that guy still calls me Sapolo, so I guess I kind of grew up as a 49ers fan in a way, too, bandwagon style, but...
How about you, Luke? You going Browns?
So because they hired Greg Williams, I hope only the worst things happen to the Browns.
And they
But
will.
if I had to choose to be a fan of one of them, I think being a Browns fan would be better because their future is brighter.
Wow. Yeah, I do
The
think
49ers are a special kind of dysfunction.
their management is awful. It's
It's going to get worse before it gets better.
It's
They're going to
probably
be
worse
the new
than the
Browns
league.
in 10 years.
Are you talking Browns or 49ers? Because Browns management's kind of messed up too, though.
But they have gotten to a place where they actually have patience and continuity. They just went 1-15 and kept their coach. They are committed.
Ooh. Yeah.
They're committed to Hugh, and they got to commit. Could you imagine firing 2 coaches in 2 years?
No.
What kind of franchise would do that?
Yeah, and to be honest, I think that brown and orange is probably the best color combination in the world. I love that color. I own a lot of Browns stuff just because I like orange and brown.
I don't think I've ever heard that before.
Have you ever seen like an orange and brown Charger? Like it's orange, but it has brown. It's just awesome. It's like
They do have
it's
a
like
nice classic feel.
Reese's Pieces. You know, it's
Ooh.
yeah, it reminds me of E.T. and childhood and happiness. What a awkward way to end the show.
We're still doing this when we're still doing this podcast 10 years from now. We'll go back and revisit and see which team has progressed further. So,
Yeah, write that down. Remind me.
right, I will.
Siri, remind me in 10 years.
Remind the new host too, and shout me out at the beginning of the show. I'll be listening and crying. But yeah, with that, I think we'll wrap it up. I do also want to thank one of our new partners, which is VikingsTerritory.com. I've been writing some articles for them, and they help promote our podcast, which is amazing because they are a great website, very established, great articles, great guys. So check out Vikings Territory. I'm sure if you listen to this podcast, you probably go to Vikings Territory and or probably saw this on Vikings Territory. So I wanted to thank those guys for that and give them that shout out. Also, again, wanted to shout out our sponsor, SkullYourHome.com. If you're looking to buy a house, sell a house, look at SkullYourHome.com. Other than that, this has been the reluctant episode of the Purple Journal podcast. I just wanted to.
We should tell them that we're
listening.
going every other week.
I don't know. Well, we'll see. I guess I have an idea about that. We can talk about that off the air, but I'm sure the 15 people listening are going to be on pins and needles. It's a to be continued. But yeah, follow us on Twitter, on Facebook, and thank you.